For the people who work numbers, I am giving you free advice that those of you who are holding dollars, you shortly might go into losses. You better do what you must do, because this market is going to be different in a couple of weeks.
What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having an all right day today. Now, it is starting to get a little bit crazy, a little bit wild out there, and this is actually the time in which I believe we need to pay the most attention. Now, I've heard a lot of fear-mongering, a lot of collapse and doom and gloom, and the end of fiat, the end of the US dollar, and all these things right now, but I do believe that we are witnessing something very, very historical. Now, talking about what we're seeing on the Bitcoin price, we are seeing a slight pullback. Now, remember, I did tell you in my previous video that I'm not a fan of these rounded tops. It does sort of sometimes send that signal of weakness. So does Bitcoin have to pull back to some levels? There are some key points that we need to go over. If you are looking to trade specifically, I have to tell you these levels. But in today's video, I want to talk about something a little bit bigger, and it's going to be one of those show, don't tell things. I know a lot of people, they come to my channel and they just want me to basically just explain everything like to a 5-year-old, but I think this is one of those times in which you need to interpret the data yourself and ask yourself what you need to do, because we saw a video clip of the president of China talking to the president of Russia, basically, saying, my dear old friend, there's about to be a big change that we have not seen in 100 years, and at the same time, we're also seeing a potential collapse of not only the banking system, but the dollar itself as a reserve currency. Now, I know this sounds like typical doom and gloom, but is Balaji correct? And even if Balaji is only partially correct, is now the time that we should maybe consider getting some Bitcoin? So we're going to go over all that today. If that sounds good to you guys, you know what to do. Lots of content in this video. You're going to want to stick around. I'm going to get you up to date on everything. So let's dive in. Let's have a look super quick. Now, what was quite interesting was we actually were hanging around up in this upper we had this CME futures gap up here. We did close that gap. Now, remember, we had this original gap down here. What's interesting is we actually came down and closed that, but when we sprung back up, we actually created a second gap. And I've never seen anything like this on the chart where, while in the process of closing the old gap, we then go on to create a new gap. So I don't know if this is significant or not. This is sort of a learning experience for all of us. But if that is the case, full warning ahead, that does bring the potential of Bitcoin coming down to around $20,300 as a possibility. Now, are we going to go that low? Well, as you can see right now, I told you guys that I'm not a fan of these sort of rounded tops. They sort of show kind of weakness because you're not seeing that crazy buying. What you're seeing is more of potential distribution. Now, look, we can come all the way back up here, put in a higher high, right? And then we'll just be putting in a nice sideways parallel channel, and that's fine. But in order for me to feel confident about this consolidation, I would need Bitcoin to at least retest around $28,600. Just give me a little retest. Just retest, hit that little confirmation, and then boom, consolidation. Because if we don't get back above this upward sloping trend, then yes, I do believe we're coming back down here and we're going to retest this area, right? You can see right here the significance of this Terra Luna crash right here, right? And then where it was support right here, it was resistance right here, it was resistance right here, right? So would it be impossible to come back down and retest that? No, not at all, right? And then you could say that, we're still continuing the parabolic uptrend. So I wouldn't freak out if we see Bitcoin fall down to some of these levels, close the CME futures gap. At the end of the day, what you want to see is higher highs and higher lows. So far, on this shorter time frame, not on the broader time frame, we have that right now, right? Now, the scarier perspective is, what if we just bounce around in this area, straight out to July? What if Bitcoin comes all the way back down to like 19,000, then goes all, what if it does that and just bores the heck out of people? Well, that is a possibility. But of course, remember that these patterns, these breakouts, if you want to take it from the retest, does give us these targets, of potentially around $52,000 to $58,000, depending. So is Bitcoin going to get to $60,000? Well, Kevin Svensson thinks it's possible, right? He was talking about that parabolic curve. However, if we look over here, we still have not gotten the weekly confirmation on all of these indicators. So I can't fully say 100% that we're back into bullish territory. But as I said, guys, if you want to get alerted immediately as soon as I see something, make sure you get subscribed. And if you do want to take advantage of the volatility that is most likely going to follow this move, then check out the links below in the description. There is over $56,000 in bonuses, guys. You know, check out Apex, Bybit, Femex, be safe on centralized exchanges. You know the drill. But what have we seen? Amid all the madness, MicroStrategy repaid its $205 million Silvergate loan at a 22% discount. And you can see right here, they've acquired an additional 6,455 Bitcoin for $150 million. Now, this puts their average at around 23,239. I think their total average, right here, is around 29,817. So they're still technically underwater a little bit. But what's been crazy is I like to look at the on-chain data as long as not just the technicals, but the fundamentals. And the fact that we're seeing the Bitcoin hash rate just really skyrocketing lately, my question is, where is this coming from? Like, who's turning on all these mining units and providing so much more hash rate and so much more security to the network? There's something going on in the bigger picture. Somebody somewhere is realizing that, Bitcoin is really the place to be. And, obviously you saw this clip in the start of the video. I'll just play this again for you, not to create fear.
For the people who work numbers, I am giving you free advice that those of you who are holding dollars, you surely might go into losses. You better do what you must do, because this market is going to be different in a couple of weeks.
So if that's the case, where do you run to? What do you do? Do you jump into these random, do you buy gold? Do you buy gold? I mean, okay, so gold, right? So you can argue that gold has been consolidating for quite some time, but, I'm just going to point this out. Sure, I mean, if you look at this chart, it looks like it's doing better than Bitcoin. Theoretically, it's doing better than Bitcoin. But I mean, realistically, if we go back to 2011, okay, 2011, we had this peak right here. And we come all the way over to where we are today. Gold is up not even 2%. So yeah, now I'm not going to lie. What am I seeing right here in the gold chart? I am seeing a giant potential cup and handle. Right? This is also a descending broadening wedge as well. So this is ultimately bullish. It does tell me that gold should start moving, but I had to hold gold since 2011. I had to hold gold for 12 years just to only be up 2%. Bitcoin is literally up over 50% in just the past few months. Okay, so I understand that short-term volatility, you could argue, yeah, Bitcoin is still down 70% from the all-time high. Okay, it's down from the all-time high. But if we go back to the beginning of 2017, right? Everybody always cherry picks the tops, right? The 20K, the 70K. Go with the lows, right? Look at the lows. The Bitcoin low in the beginning of 2017 was 1,000, not 900. The Bitcoin low now was 15.5. That's still a 15x. Gold didn't do that. But I'm not saying don't buy gold, don't buy silver. I'm not saying that, because something that's actually kind of crazy. A lot of people don't know this. They're like, will the US buy Bitcoin? Well, actually, the US government has more Bitcoin than MicroStrategy and Tesla combined. They have 205,000 Bitcoin in their possession, which is slightly over 1% of the current circulating supply. So the US government actually already does own over 1% of the Bitcoin supply from, all the confiscations and all these illegal activities and busts and things that they've done over time. So it is pretty crazy when you think about that, right? Just something to think about. But this is where I wanted to play some videos. I want to take a back seat today. I do. I talk a lot. I talk all day on the channel. I just want to play these clips for you. This was the first one that came out from Wall Street Silver. And interestingly enough, this was on CNN. Now, I know what some people are saying. Oh, well, CNN is known for being liberal and Fox is known for being conservative, or at least that's what people tell me, right? Well, guess what? Both of these people, both of these networks are reporting on the same exact thing. And they're making the same exact point. And we have to understand as people how dire this situation is. So I just wanted to allow this clip to play. It's a little bit long, but I highly suggest you listen to this clip at least once to sort of understand where we are and what's going on.
Here's my take. The most interesting outcome of the three-day summit between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping got limited media attention. Describing their talks, Putin said, "We are in favor of using the Chinese yuan for settlements between Russia and the countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America." So, the world's second largest economy and its largest energy exporter are together actively trying to dent the dollar's dominance as the anchor of the international financial system. Will they succeed? The dollar is America's last surviving superpower. It gives Washington unrivaled economic and political muscle. It can slap sanctions on countries unilaterally, which frees that country out of large parts of the world economy. And Washington can spend freely, certain that its debt will be bought up by the rest of the world. The war against Ukraine, combined with Washington's increasingly confrontational approach to China, have created a perfect storm in which both Russia and China are accelerating efforts to diversify away from the dollar. Their central banks are keeping less of their reserves in dollars, and most trade between them is being settled in the yuan. They are also making efforts to get other countries to follow suit. The Biden administration has handled the economic war against Russia extremely effectively by building a coalition of almost all the world's advanced economies. That makes it hard to escape from the dollar into other highly valued stable currencies like the euro or the pound or the Canadian dollar, because those countries are also warring with Russia. What might have been a sharper turning point for the dollar's role was Donald Trump's decision in May 2018 to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. The European Union was strenuously opposed to this move, but it watched as the dollar's dominance meant that Iran was immediately excluded from the world economy. Jean-Claude Juncker, then president of the European Commission, proposed enhancing the euro's role internationally to shield the continent from what he called selfish unilateralism. The Commission outlined a path to achieve this. It hasn't happened. There remain too many fundamental doubts about the future of the euro itself. Dollar dominance is firmly entrenched for many good reasons. A globalized economy needs a single currency for ease and efficiency. The dollar is stable. You can buy and sell it anytime, and it's governed largely by the market and not the whims of a government. That's why China's efforts to expand the yuan's role internationally have not worked. Ironically, if Xi Jinping wanted to cause the greatest pain to America, he would liberalize his financial sector and make the yuan a true competitor to the dollar. But that would take him in the direction of markets and openness that is the opposite of his current domestic goals. All that said, Washington's weaponizing of the dollar over the last decade has led many important countries to search for ways to make sure that they do not become the next Russia. The numbers are revealing. The share of dollars in global central bank reserves has dropped from roughly 70% 20 years ago to less than 60% today and falling steadily. The Europeans and the Chinese are trying to build international payment systems outside the dollar-dominated SWIFT. Saudi Arabia has flirted with the idea of pricing its oil in yuan. India is settling most of its oil purchases from Russia in non-dollar currencies. Digital currencies might be another alternative, and in fact, China's central bank has created one. All of these alternatives add costs. But the last few years should have taught us that increasingly nations are willing to pay a price when they want political goals to trump economic ones. We keep searching for the single replacement for the dollar, and there will not be one. But could the currency suffer weakness by 1,000 cuts? That seems a more likely scenario. The author and investor Ruchir Sharma points out, right now, for the first time in my memory, we have an international financial crisis in which the dollar has been weakening rather than strengthening. I wonder if this is a sign of things to come. If it is, Americans should worry. I spoke last week about the bad geopolitical habits Washington has developed because of its unrivaled unipolar status. It's even more true economically. America's politicians have gotten very used to spending seemingly without any concern about deficits. Public debt in America has risen almost five-fold from roughly $6.5 trillion 20 years ago to $31.5 trillion today. The Fed has solved a series of financial crises by massively expanding its balance sheet, almost 12-fold, from around $730 billion 20 years ago to about $8.7 trillion today. All of this only works because of the dollar's unique status. If that were to wane, America will face a reckoning like none before.
So again, said better than I could have said myself. What has given the dollar its strength really is its world reserve currency status, right? But some of the actions that the US has taken recently have not really been in the best favor necessarily of upholding that status. And again, now this one comes over from Fox. So you basically have both of these networks. And this story is talking about, Dennis Porter says the dollar is in rapid decline. The USA's only option might be to move into Bitcoin. Will they do it? Would they actually move into something that they knew they couldn't control? Or are they just going to go ahead with their CBDCs and their surveillance? And also, would that even solve the problem?
Vladimir Putin announced this week that Russia will begin using the Chinese yuan for international payments instead of the dollar. Saudi Arabia is also in talks with Beijing to do the same thing. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, they are in talks with Iran as well to consider an economic alliance with China and Russia. And they can even be joining the BRIC countries, which is an acronym for these countries here, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries all have emerging economies. So what happens if our economy and the U.S. dollar are no longer the world's dominant currency? Former Assistant Treasury Secretary and host of the Monica Crowley podcast, Monica Crowley, is here to weigh in. Monica, great to see you this morning. Let's start right there. What happens if these emerging economies move away from the U.S. dollar towards the Chinese yuan?
Well, good morning, Will. It's great to be with you. And it's really hard to overstate exactly how catastrophic the abandonment of the U.S. dollar would be as the world's global reserve currency. Look, since the end of World War II, the dollar has been the safe place to go, and it's been backed up by a couple of things. It originally was backed up by gold, but President Nixon took us off the gold standard, so there's no hard asset backing up the dollar anymore for the last 50 years. But also it's been backed up by the strength and economic power of the United States and the fact that oil has always been traded in dollars. If that were to end, that would mean the end of the U.S. dollar. Look, there is a perfect storm happening right now, Will. The world's reserve currency being that, having that status has been a real privilege, but we've abused the privilege by wholly reckless monetary and fiscal policies over many years, certainly over the last couple of years, which has really devalued the dollar. On top of that, now you do have this perfect storm of Biden's weakness, his war on American domestic energy production, the Ukraine war, and as you point out, because of all of these things, we've got America's enemies led by China forming a new economic bloc. And all it would take at this point now, because we're at this pivotal moment, Will, is for Saudi Arabia, who has indicated that they're open to this, to say, you know what, we're going to be open to considering other currencies to trade in oil. If that were to happen, there would be a complete implosion of the global economic system, but certainly the American economic system. And if that were to happen, you'd be looking at sky-high inflation, just raging Weimar Republic kind of inflation. If you think inflation is bad now, just wait. But more importantly, we would lose our economic dominance and we would lose our superpower status.
Monica, the world's reserve currency, you said it's a privilege for the United States for the dollar to have been the world's currency. How does that relate to each individual American? How has that changed or impacted or improved our lives throughout the last several decades?
Yeah, I mean, it's given the United States incredible dominance in the world in terms of the economic system and in terms of trade. It's kept prices down. So whether it's energy prices, whether it's your food prices, the entire global economic system is reliant on the safe and secure dollar. But that is no longer true, again, because we've been printing money like crazy and devalued the power of the dollar and the value of the dollar. But on top of of it now, again, oil is the critical linchpin of this. If Saudi Arabia decides to join with America's enemies here and start trading oil in different currencies, that is going to undermine the entire global economic system. And here at home, you know what it's going to mean for us? It's going to mean raging inflation, so much worse than anything we have ever experienced, Will.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, they're setting it up so that they can then come to the rescue by introducing central bank digital currencies. If they were to do that, and the United States already has a pilot program, that means the loss of your individual economic freedom, because the government will have total access and control of everything you buy and sell, and the ability to turn it off like that.
One could argue that maybe if everything was digital right now, see, the thing is you can go to the bank, right? And you can ask to get your cash pulled out, right? I want to get my cash. So we know that right now, I think about a 2% bank run would destroy the banks. I think we've gone over those numbers. But hypothetically, you know, I go to the bank, I want $500. They give me 500 pieces of paper. Now, what do the pieces of paper mean? They don't mean anything, but hey, at least I can get something for it, right? But now, if everything is digital and it's just digits on a screen, right? Then who's to say if the money is or isn't actually there? Couldn't it all just be a giant system of play money? It's just something interesting to think about, even though some would argue that's already what it is right now. And to make matters worse is the fact that we are seeing the regulatory unclarity right here in the US. And even just pointing out, Laura Shin had a conversation with the chief legal officer at Coinbase. And I mean, he basically says, we've been begging the SEC, we've been trying to meet with them, and they just won't make it clear.
Just to give you some sense of the conversations that predated the notice, we have met with the SEC on at least 30 occasions over the last 9 months to try to get to some common understanding of what registration could look like for a cryptocurrency exchange like Coinbase. We had 30 or more other engagements with them over that same period of time, all focused on what reasonable rules could and should apply so that a cryptocurrency exchange could be registered, operate inside of the regulatory perimeter. How could we accommodate the unique elements of blockchain technologies so that investors and consumers get the information they need, and at the same time, the fundamental structures of blockchain networks are understood and respected. And yet every time we have attempted to engage, address particular concerns that might come up, we've essentially hit a brick wall. It's also important, I think, to understand, Laura, that we have not limited our engagement with the SEC to simply these private conversations. Now, going back to last July, for example, we filed a petition for formal rulemaking, which is a public request that the SEC issue rules. And in that petition, we laid out something like 50 or more questions that we think need to be answered in order for any crypto framework to make sense. Again, we were given essentially no response.
So I know this was a lot of video content to take in today, but there was so much I wanted to go over, and I just felt like this was one of those show don't tell kind of days. We're going to have a lot of analysis coming up. There's going to be a lot of things, and trust me, I have an opinion on all of this, and most of you, I think you know where I stand, but I think today's video has gone long enough. So is it time to buy Bitcoin? Well, I cannot tell you financial advice to buy Bitcoin or not, but I can tell you that Bitcoin is sitting at a relatively historically low CBBI level, which means that the risk versus the return of simply buying Bitcoin historically potentially at these levels is very good. And also considering the potential impending national crisis that could be afoot, potentially, not trying to spread some FUD, it might not hurt to just have some insurance instead. All right? So that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. You guys rock. We'll get into all the charts and all the typical content, but there was so much news that came out over the weekend, and I had to just share that with you. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. If you got any type of value out of this video, not trying to scare anyone, not trying to make you freak out, I just want to be honest and open and share what I'm seeing. And really, at the end of the day, this just seems like a giant advertisement for Bitcoin. So that is it for me. If you guys do want to learn how to trade, there is always opportunities to make money in the upswings and the downswings, and you can trade perpetuals using Bitcoin as well. So you can use Bitcoin as the underlying asset so that you can then actually get more Bitcoin, if that's your goal, if that's what you're looking to do. If you want to learn how to do all that, check out this tutorial popping up right here, right now. Until next time, stay crypto, and of course, peace out.